Chica had started noticing little things vanishing from her home in Lagos: earrings, a few notes of cash, small boxes she kept tucked away. At first, she thought she was just being forgetful, but the nagging feeling would not leave her alone. So one quiet afternoon, without telling anyone, she decided to install small security cameras in different corners of the house. She only wanted to ease her mind, nothing more. Days passed without anything unusual, until one night her phone buzzed with a motion alert while she was half asleep. She rubbed her eyes and tapped the screen, expecting to see her cat wandering around or maybe the wind playing with the curtains. But what appeared froze her blood. On the grainy footage, at exactly 3:12 a.m., she saw two figures moving through her living room. At first, she leaned closer, confused. Then her heart sank. It was her own sister Ngozi and Ngozi's husband, Desmond. They were not visiting, not looking for help, they were carrying boxes, pulling out jewelry cases, even using the spare key to her locked cabinet, the one she had never shared with anyone. Chica's breath caught when she heard their muffled laughter through the camera microphone, mocking her, calling her a fool. In that moment, it was not just about stolen things, it was the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. The people she trusted most were stripping her home bare, and she was watching it happen live, powerless in her own bed. That night was calm in Lagos, the kind of night where the whole street seemed to be asleep. Chica had been tossing and turning on her bed, restless for no reason. She had just started drifting off when her phone buzzed beside her. At first, she thought it was one of those random messages or maybe a late-night notification, but when she glanced at the screen, her heart skipped. It was a motion alert from the security camera in her living room. She groaned, thinking it was probably her cat again or maybe just the curtain moving with the fan. Still half asleep, she tapped on the alert to check, her eyelids heavy, her mind still foggy. But the second the live feed opened, sleep left her completely. The screen showed two shadowy figures moving slowly in her living room. For a moment, her mind tried to convince her that she was dreaming. She sat up quickly, eyes wide, holding the phone close to her face. The figures turned, and in the dim light, their faces became clear. Chica gasped so loudly she clapped her hand over her mouth. It was her sister, Ngozi. Right beside her was Ngozi's husband, Desmond. They weren't guests, they weren't checking in on her. They were tiptoeing like strangers, their eyes darting around as if afraid of being caught. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She leaned closer, praying she was wrong, but the evidence was there in the glow of the night camera. She saw Ngozi open a drawer like she had done it before, her hands steady, as though she already knew where everything was kept. Desmond followed behind, carrying a bag, carefully picking items and slipping them inside. They weren't confused or hesitant. They knew exactly what they had come for. Chica's lips trembled as she kept watching. Her throat felt tight, like she couldn't breathe. These were the people she trusted, the ones she had always opened her doors to. She had helped them when they had nothing, she had fed them at her own table. And here they were, moving through her house like thieves in the night. The camera microphone picked up faint sounds, and Chica felt a chill run down her spine. They were whispering and laughing. She heard Desmond call her, too careless. Then Ngozi's voice followed, mocking softly, calling her, a fool who doesn't deserve any of this. The words cut deeper than any knife. She wanted to scream at them through the screen, to shout their names, to stop them, but all she could do was sit there frozen, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Every tick of the clock made the scene feel longer, heavier. At that moment, she realized this wasn't just about losing a few valuables. This was her own blood betraying her in the cruelest way. The silence of the night outside was complete, but inside Chica's heart there was a storm, a roar she couldn't silence. She stared at the screen, wide awake now, knowing life would never be the same again. For a few seconds Chica tried to calm herself. Maybe, she told herself, Ngozi and Desmond were only sneaking in to borrow something. Maybe they had lost their way or had some kind of surprise planned for her. She wanted to believe there had to be an innocent reason for what she was seeing on the screen. But the more she watched, the harder it became to lie to herself. This was not a surprise, not a mistake. Ngozi was holding one of Chica's jewelry boxes, opening it carefully and slipping pieces into her own bag as if they belonged to her. Desmond bent down to lift two small cartons that Chica had hidden under the shelf, cartons filled with things she had saved for years. Chica blinked in shock when her eyes caught something else, something that made her whole body freeze. Ngozi reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver key. Chica's chest tightened. That was the exact key to her locked cabinet, the one place in her house she never allowed anyone near. She had hidden it so carefully, sure no one even knew about it. And yet, here was her sister, sliding the key into the lock, turning it slowly like she had done it many times before. The door of the cabinet swung open, and her heart broke wide open with it. Inside that cabinet were her most personal things, documents, her savings, and some family heirlooms that had been passed down to her. She saw Ngozi pull them out, one by one, without hesitation. Chica's breath came fast. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out, her phone trembling in her grip. Then came the sound that crushed her more than the theft itself. Through the camera's tiny microphone, she heard their whispers turn into quiet laughter. Desmond chuckled as he stuffed valuables into his bag. "She's too careless," he said, his voice sharp with mockery. Ngozi's laughter followed, soft but poisonous. "This fool doesn't deserve any of this," she whispered, her words slicing into Chica's chest like a blade. Tears filled Chica's eyes as she listened. It wasn't just about what they were stealing, it was the betrayal, the cruelty behind their words. The same sister whose hospital bills she had paid, the same man she had trusted to help fix her roof, were now standing in her living room at night, tearing her life apart piece by piece and laughing while doing it. Her heart felt like it was breaking in slow motion. She wanted to scream, to run down the stairs and catch them in the act, but her body was frozen in shock. She could only sit there, watching through the screen, as her own blood treated her house like a shop to be looted. Every laugh, every word, every stolen item burned itself into her memory. That night, she realized she had not just lost her valuables. She had lost something much deeper, her trust, her family, and the peace she thought she had in her own home. Chica sat there with her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her eyes burning as the truth unfolded before her. What she was watching was not just two thieves sneaking into a house. This was something far worse. It was blood betraying blood. It was her own sister and her husband, people she had loved and trusted, treating her home as if it were nothing but a shop to be emptied. Chica's chest ached as she remembered all the times she had stood by them. When Ngozi was sick and couldn't afford her hospital bills, it was Chica who had stepped in, paying every last naira without a second thought. When Desmond came to her one rainy season begging for help to repair the roof over their heads, it was Chica who gave him the money and even showed up to supervise the work. She had sheltered them when they had nowhere to go, fed them at her own table, made sacrifices so they could stand on their feet again. And this was how they chose to repay her. Every movement on the screen cut into her like a knife. She saw Ngozi slip her wedding ring off her own finger just to try on one of Chica's gold rings, giggling at how it sparkled. She saw Desmond empty a drawer filled with documents and valuables, treating them like junk to be tossed into his bag. Their faces showed no guilt, no fear, only greed. The laughter she heard made her skin crawl. They didn't just want her belongings, they wanted to mock her, to humiliate her, to strip her of dignity. Chica's tears blurred the screen, but she refused to look away. Her heart raced, her throat dry, as a cold realization settled in. These were not strangers. Strangers stealing would have hurt less. Strangers do not know your secrets, your hiding places, your weaknesses. But Ngozi knew. She knew exactly where the key was, where the jewelry was hidden, where the money was kept. She knew because Chica had trusted her with her life. And now, under the cover of night, that trust was being shattered beyond repair. Chica thought about the times they had sat together at family gatherings, laughing, sharing food, praying together. She thought about how much she had bragged to her friends about her sister, how proud she had been of the bond they shared. But now, in front of her, that bond was being destroyed in silence. Her sister was not acting like family. She was acting like a stranger, a thief, someone who saw her not as blood but as prey. The betrayal cut deeper than the loss of any gold or money. It was the betrayal of love, of loyalty, of blood. Chica hugged her knees to her chest as she sat on her bed, unable to stop shaking. What she was witnessing wasn't just theft. It was the cruelest form of betrayal, the kind that leaves scars no camera can capture, scars that never heal. That night, her home stopped being a safe place. It became the crime scene of a broken heart. By the time the first light of dawn crept into her room, Chica was still sitting awake, her phone heavy in her hand. She had not closed her eyes once. Her face was swollen from crying, her heart beating with a strange mix of pain and cold determination. She knew she couldn't let this slide. This was not just about money or jewelry. This was about betrayal, lies, and the people she had trusted most trying to ruin her. With trembling hands, she opened her phone again and began to carefully download every second of the footage. She saved each clip, making sure the timestamps were visible, making sure every whisper picked up by the tiny microphone was clear. She wasn't going to leave a single doubt. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the evidence was undeniable. The camera captured Ngozi's face perfectly as she reached for the cabinet Chica had always denied even existed. The expression on her sister's face was not of hesitation, but of confidence, as if she had been doing this for months. Chica paused the video at that frame, staring at her sister's face frozen on the screen. That image burned itself into her memory. It was the proof that destroyed every excuse she had tried to give them in her heart. No one could argue with it, no one could twist it. Ngozi had betrayed her, and now the truth was recorded forever. As the morning sun rose higher, Chica sat surrounded by files on her laptop and phone, video clips, screenshots, even audio snippets where Desmond's voice mocked her, calling her careless, while Ngozi whispered cruel words about her. Each file was like a dagger, but together they became her shield. She renamed them, organized them, kept multiple copies in case anyone ever tried to make them disappear. This wasn't just footage anymore. It was a weapon, the kind that could bring down not just a person but an entire reputation. She imagined what would happen if the world saw what she had seen. The perfect sister image Ngozi had built would collapse instantly. Desmond's charm and respect in the community would vanish the moment people heard his voice sneering at Chica while stuffing stolen goods into his bag. And deep down, Chica knew she wasn't wrong. The evidence was so clear, so sharp, that even a stranger could see the truth without explanation. Her hands shook, but for the first time that night, her fear began to turn into strength. The betrayal had broken her heart, but the proof gave her power. No longer was she just the victim lying awake in the dark. She now held the files that could shake her entire family, her community, even beyond. By mid-morning, she had made her choice. What began as a quiet installation of cameras for peace of mind had now become the start of a storm. And at the center of that storm was a single timestamp, 3:12 a.m., the moment that captured her sister's true face and turned blood into enemies. Chica could have gone straight to the police with the evidence, but something inside her told her that would be too easy. Jail was certain, but it would not carry the same weight as letting the entire family see the truth with their own eyes. So she decided to wait, to plan a scene that Ngozi and Desmond could never escape from. 2 nights later, her parents hosted a family dinner. The air was filled with laughter, the smell of pounded yam and pepper soup spreading across the room, children running about, and relatives sharing jokes. Everyone was relaxed, everyone was happy, and Ngozi sat at the table with her usual bright smile, acting as though nothing in the world was wrong. Chica forced herself to smile too, though inside her stomach turned with anger. She barely touched her food. Instead, she kept glancing at her phone in her lap, waiting for the right moment. When the laughter was at its loudest, when her parents were complimenting Ngozi's cooking and Desmond was talking proudly about his so-called business deals, Chica quietly stood up. Without a word, she walked to the TV, connected her phone, and pressed play. The room shifted instantly. The cheerful sound stopped, replaced by the soft crackle of the television as the screen came to life. At first, no one understood what they were looking at. But within seconds, gasps filled the air. There was Ngozi, in grainy night vision, pulling open Chica's drawers. There was Desmond, stuffing bags with valuables. The camera showed their faces clearly, their voices captured through the microphone as they laughed and called Chica a fool. Silence fell so heavy it felt like the air itself had frozen. Chica's mother covered her mouth, her father's face went pale. Cousins stared wide-eyed, unable to speak. The family priest stood up slowly, whispering a prayer under his breath as though he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ngozi jumped to her feet, her eyes wild, pointing at the screen. "It's not us," she shouted, her voice shaking. But the evidence was too clear. Desmond tried to speak, tried to say the video was fake, but just as he opened his mouth, the audio from the clip played, his own voice mocking Chica, his own laughter filling the room. The tension exploded. Some relatives shouted in anger, others turned away in shame. Ngozi's reputation as the sweet, perfect sister shattered in a single moment. Desmond's face glistened with sweat as the cousins glared at him. Nobody wanted to hear excuses. The betrayal was too deep, too visible, too undeniable. Chica stood silently by the TV, her hands steady now. For once, she didn't need to say anything. The video spoke for her. In that living room, surrounded by the very family they had tried to deceive, Ngozi and Desmond were exposed completely. They weren't just thieves anymore. They were traitors revealed in the most humiliating way possible, and nothing would ever erase that moment. The moment the video ended, the room erupted like a storm. Ngozi jumped from her seat, her face red with panic, and she screamed at the top of her voice that it wasn't real. She pointed at Chica, accusing her of setting them up, of editing the video to make them look guilty. But no one in the room moved to defend her. Desmond tried to speak with his usual calm, waving his hands as though he could explain it all away, but the more he spoke, the clearer it became that he had no excuse. Then the audio replayed, their laughter and their voices sharp and undeniable. Every word they said on that night echoed through the room, cutting off whatever weak defense they tried to build. Chica's parents sat frozen. Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she clutched her wrapper tightly, as though the fabric was the only thing keeping her steady. Her father looked like the strength had left his body, his shoulders bent under the shame. The family priest stood up, shaking his head, whispering that he could not believe what his own eyes and ears had just witnessed. Cousins exchanged looks of shock, some even whispering under their breath about how blind they had been to ever think Ngozi and Desmond were trustworthy. The silence didn't last long. Anger broke out from different corners of the room. An uncle shouted that Ngozi had brought disgrace to the family. An aunt muttered that Desmond had always been greedy, but nobody expected this. The children, confused and frightened, clung to their parents as voices rose louder. Ngozi tried to scream over them all, but her words had no weight anymore. The video had already destroyed every shred of her image. By the next morning, the damage had spread far beyond the four walls of that house. In Lagos, secrets never stay secret for long. Relatives carried the story, neighbors whispered, and soon the whole community was buzzing with the shocking news. People replayed the video on their phones, sharing it, shaking their heads in disbelief. The perfect image Ngozi had built for years, the kind sister, the woman everyone admired, collapsed overnight. Desmond's world crumbled just as fast. His business partners, who had trusted him with deals and investments, saw the video and immediately pulled back. They wanted no association with a man caught on camera stealing from his own family. Calls that used to bring him money and respect now brought only silence. He became a man avoided, whispered about, and shamed in public. For Ngozi, the pain was even sharper. She had always been the one everyone praised, the one who wore the mask of perfection at family gatherings. But now, people crossed the street to avoid her, women shook their heads when her name was mentioned, and friends cut ties one after another. The betrayal captured at 3:12 a.m. had not just stolen Chica's valuables, it had stolen Ngozi and Desmond's entire standing in the community. Their names were now tied to shame, and no excuse could wash it away. Chica could have ended everything with that dinner. She had already exposed Ngozi and Desmond in front of the whole family, and their names were ruined in the neighborhood. But the more she thought about it, the more she knew it wasn't enough. They had walked into her home like strangers, mocked her, stolen from her, and laughed while doing it. If she let them go free, she would never sleep in peace again. So Chica gathered every piece of evidence, the videos, the audio, the screenshots, and walked into the police station with her head held high. The officers didn't need much convincing. The footage was clear. The voices were theirs. The timestamp showed everything. This wasn't gossip or rumor, it was truth frozen in digital proof. Papers were signed, and within days the knock came on Ngozi and Desmond's door. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as police led them out, handcuffed and silent. The same people who once held their heads high were now being pushed into a van like common criminals. In the prison visiting room, Chica faced them one last time. Ngozi's eyes were swollen from crying, her voice breaking as she begged, "Please, sister, forgive me. Blood is blood. Don't do this." Desmond sat beside her, his pride gone, his face hollow. But Chica didn't flinch. She had spent too many nights crying, too many moments replaying their laughter as they tore through her home. Now it was her turn to be strong. For once, justice wasn't just a dream or a promise, it was real, and it was hers. As she turned away from the prison bars, Chica felt a strange calm settle over her. She had lost a sister, but she had gained something greater, the courage to choose truth over blood, and the strength to finally give herself the peace she deserved.